Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my creative process. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, and your pal, and I'm excited to have you back for episode 237. This week we've got sort of a, it'll be similar to some of the things we've made in the past, but a new spin on it, and I'm excited to get in here and use some of Octane's volume settings to create sort of a watery effect. I'll show you what I mean. So let's get in there. Chat is open. Feel free to say what's up. And yeah, feel free to check out the link in the description below and see how you can sort of help support what we're doing here. Very much appreciate that. So far I've got this simple kind of landscape set up. I want to swap those values. I just like the rounder look we get. And I might want to play with the, what do we call it? The plateau level, I guess. So yeah, I kind of push this tall area up. Let's see if we can modify this too. Yeah. So I want to create sort of an island, if you will. I wanted to sort of decide on a camera angle early as well. Let's fire this up, get some lighting in there. It's kind of cool. What's up, Sergio? Thanks for tuning in. How you doing today? I'm going to turn borders at sea level off for this guy. Make them much, much larger. This is going to be what sort of finalizes and spreads out our the bed of the body of water. Cool. It's basically there just to expand the edges of this landscape that we've already got going. Cool. All right, so now what I want to do is start scattering some things over this island. We're going to start with some really simple shapes. Let's just go with a capsule for now. You know, my favorite. I'm going to turn the segments way down. What I'm also going to do is add a camera because I think I like this camera position actually. We'll probably wind up tweaking it, but I really want to address this as a singular image, and I want to lock in that camera position early so we can really consider the composition. All right, and the reason I got out of here is because I wanted to expand this. Just take off this bottom bit, just make our model a little bit more efficient. And I'll move this down just a touch. Cool. So let's add a scatter object. And add this landscape here. Change that to surface. And I'm going to turn normal align almost all the way down, most of the way down. Let's also scale this way down, that capsule. Keep way up a little bit. Let's add a noise shader here. Let's also throw this over to path tracing. There's a little bit nicer lighting. Cool. And since we've got path tracing on, let's go ahead and push some of these settings down because they get a bit insane. I'm just going to go to like something like 720 there. Let's even call it 540. GI clamp to 1 and turn on adaptive sampling. I did that for pretty much every scene. Seems to be the way to do it. All right, now I guess let's go ahead and just add in this depth effect that I was talking about. What I want to do is use this fog volume instead of water. This creates really kind of a beautiful effect. All right, now let's select which area we kind of want to be above water. Maybe we'll wind up adding some more. Also want to let's change this to say 15. Make the voxels in this fog volume slightly larger and therefore a little quicker to render. At least that's the theory. Now we can go ahead and modify a little bit the look of this water. And first by adding in a little bit of color, a little bit of blue. And then with this shader, we can go from black to white, and what that's going to do is affect sort of the opacity, so to speak. So all the way white is more dense and a little waxier, and further down towards black, it's going to be more of a clear, liquidy kind of look. You can see this is what I'm looking to do. I love the gradation you get along the edges of these landscapes here. And I'm not going to go all the way to black, but pretty darn close to it. We get sort of a murky color here. And I think we've got too much blue, so let's pull that back. Go pure white here. Just a touch of blue. Whoa. See what that gets it. Just a little bit of color really goes a long way. Yeah, that's feeling better. All right. I think also we should make this slightly larger because I'm seeing sort of the depth fall apart around the edges here. So make sure we get a full, full on fill. One thing you can do, let's see. What's up, Amrenda? How's it going? Thanks for tuning in. You turn the edge feather up to soften that edge, but we don't want that at all. In fact, I don't like the softness that we're getting along the edge here. I think that's probably because we've got a pretty big voxel size. Now, if I turn this to 5, it's not going to give us a harder edge. It hasn't really. Interesting. I bet that's partially driven by some of these values. Now, what happens if we go to white here? You get a harder edge? Yeah, it appears that way. The other thing we could do is add a little bit of geometry here for some like reflection, like a reflective layer, so to speak, which I think I'll wind up doing. Also turn the opacity up. It's pretty great. Wow, it's crazy the amount of color, just 2% here adds. Yeah, that's feeling pretty cool. Now let's go ahead and add in just a plain old plane across the top. It's interesting that the fog volume isn't really visible, at least not from this point of view, unless it's selected. So that's pretty close. All right, and I'm just going to use, this is a little bit of experimentation here. I've never used one of these to make kind of a reflective surface across the top. Let's see how it works. I'll leave that off for now. What I'm really after is this really beautiful depth effect that you get using this volume. What's up, Luis? Or Lewis? Let's try this. All right, well, we could potentially go back and forth on that. For now, I want to add in some simple textures here. Oops. Oops. So I'm going to make a gradient that's going to help with this depth effect. So I'm just going to paste in that brown color. Copy this color, paste it in the top here. And let's go ahead and modify the mapping. So let's turn this to flat and rotate it. You can see we're going from left to right here, brown to green, and I want to go from top to bottom. And that way the green sort of blends down into the brown, and that's going to kind of help with our depth effect. But we almost want to have the green not really go underwater too far. Just a bit there. And it's interesting that that is affecting the placement of our little bumps here. I wouldn't have expected that. So for now, I'm going to make these bumps the same green to the capsules. Great. So now we're starting to get the type of effect I was after. What I might do is open this volume up a little bit less density, a little bit of a darker value here. So we can get a little bit more visibility. What it might also help is position of our light source. I think we can also kind of bump this up a little bit. So turbidity a little stronger, power's a little stronger. And of course we can go in and enable some post-processing. What's a scene without a little bloom? Cool, now you can see relatively quickly we've set up kind of an interesting scene with some nice depth, and as this renders you can see the roughness and the surface of the water, that reflective pass we added. Give us a little bit of this line around the land masses at the surface of the water, which helps. So you can bring a little bit more opacity in. Cool. Yeah, that's helping, I think. I think we definitely need more varieties of plants and things like that. So let's go ahead and just add in some really simple kind of geometric plants. I think on the surface of these islands, we're going to need some trees. And I might just go kind of simple, big old pine tree here. Don't quite need so many rotations or height segments. What's up? Hello to you in Japan. Oh, that's cool to hear. Octane should give me some kickback. How are you finding it? Are you enjoying using Octane? I found that when I first got it, it added a lot to my Cinema 4D game. I'm a fan. Let's add a little bit of a trunk here. That has a lot of trunk. Let's scale this boy down. And again, let's go down to say like 10. So we're not really going to see this guy very much. And a quick bit of texturing. I think we'll do the trick. I'm just going to make that a child quickly. All right, so a little pine tree. And a tree like this, I think, sort of helps set the scale of your scene. All right, so now these are feeling more like substantial islands as opposed to like just little lumps in a mud puddle, right? Because we've got something that looks like would be kind of a mature sized pine tree. It'd be a little tricky to place these on the banks. So I'm gonna give myself a little bit more trunk space to work with here. That sounds like a car ad, kind of. Not that kind of trunk space. What's up, Nathan? Good to see you again. Thanks for tuning in. How's everyone doing this fine Tuesday? And I gotta say, I've been struggling keeping up with the practice a little bit recently. Apologies, I know the efforts have dropped off a little bit. I mean, it's a lucky thing. I've gotten extremely busy with my client work over the last several months, which is cool. No complaints, of course, but been hustling a bit, and sometimes, it's hard to. I'm staying pretty consistent. I missed one episode there, but sometimes it's hard to, put a ton of effort into a creative thing when you're, making your living doing creative stuff, full time. So thanks for bearing with me. What if I should put? Yeah, I bet that would be cool. Maybe put a couple of these trees kind of just inside the water. Maybe there's been a flood recently or something. Cool. Add a few more of those guys. What else? Let's get some other plants in there. What are we going to do? What if? All right, now it's going to be kind of a seaweedy thing going on here. So let's sweep it. All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this scatter. We'll call it squiggle scatter. I'm going to spell that wrong and leave it. I don't want quite as many of these. Let's call it 2,000. Let's change it to seed. Change it to keep away. Let's also make them a little thicker and a little smaller. A little less tall, I should say. I could even go less. Let's call it 1,000. I think what I need to do is create a copy of this. So I'm going to copy that up just slightly, holding Control and dragging that up. And then what I'm going to do is expand it. And I'm going to make a piece of geometry that I can use just to drive the placement of the items that I want underwater. Just going to kind of let me select these, deleting everything that's above water. I have to make a more aggressive selection. Just that way as well. It's going to be a little bit imperfect. I have to modify this a little bit, but call this underwater placement. And then I'm going to take this underwater placement and drag it down just a little bit. I dragged it up just so I could see it. Now I don't want to see it. I'm going to drag it just a touch below, so now it's not visible to the camera. And everything we use to, everything that's driven from this will, be below where we can see the geometry, but the clones should be tall enough to poke through the sort of the mesh above it. It's hard to describe for a fairly simple concept. All right, let's texture these. We should go for more yellowy green. That's too saturated. Now they feel really uniform. So there's a few things we can do there. First, let's modify the color a little bit. So I'm going to take let's see here, a random color, plug that into the diffuse, which will make them all black and white at first, which is fine. And then let's find our Octane gradient. Just throw that in between the two. I'm going to use this gradient to drive color range. I'm going to make it an audacious color at first, just to make sure we know it's working. Okay, definitely is. There's our pinks. Sometimes I get the order of the random color and the gradient wrong. This seems to be right. The other thing is they're all sort of oriented in the same direction. So rotate, we can do that a little bit too. Drag this shader into the rotation. That a little bit there, so that helps break things up. Very good. Now I've got another idea for a shape we could add. I think I'll pop into a new file briefly to do that. What if this is sort of like a, almost like a sea urchin kind of thing? Maybe something like that. I need to save that. Let's just copy it over. A little bit too large, don't you think? Let's scale that on down. All right. Now, I don't see any of these. Just clear that. Let's go ahead and make it larger too. There they are. So one of the things we need to do is, because this guy's a lot shorter than the other one, I'm going to need to push it up in the position here. So I'm just adding a little bit to this Y. I think we only need, say, 800 of these. Whoops. And they're much larger, so I'm going to turn that keep away up, which is going to limit the quantity. It's looking about right. Cool. It's looking a little rough, so I'm going to go ahead and subdivide that boy up. Boom, boom. We could jack some of those values up a little bit later if we'd like. I'm wondering now, what would this look like without the plane? I had a mind to keep the surface flat. It really does make it feel a lot more like water. And the question is, how much we want to see the bottom. Just kind of want some more depth to play with, honestly. So let's move this back down. Oof, let's not affect that placement actually, because we've got this and this to move down. Underwater placement one should scale up a little bit just to match that a bit better. Cool, getting there. I think we're just going to have a more dramatic effect with this depth if there's just more to play with. Now, we've lost a few of our trees. That one's fine. That one's fine. That one's all right for now. And now I don't mind some of these trees being underwater. I'm almost starting to view this as like as if there was a big flood, and you know these are being buried further past where they might normally be. This lake is overflowing. Oh, of course. Hit the wrong one. Go. I'm not sure if we're gonna have enough contrast on that to really even be visible. Seems like we're not. Nice. Cool. Now I might just take some kind of spherical shapes and just hand place them. There we go. I'm just going to turn that off in the viewport to gain a little bit of visibility for myself. Let's throw some rocks in here too. You guys have seen how I've made rocks a whole bunch of times. I'm going to grab some other shapes from my other file. What's up, Tom CG? Put you in Thailand. Sawati crowd. Do I have that right? I lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. Go over here and get some more rocks. All my computer specs are listed in the description below. I get that question a lot, and I always forget. I'm not super technically minded when it comes to computers. It's an NVIDIA Quadro RTX something something. You can find the exact specs below. Really, I'm trying to decide on a camera angle here. A little tricky. All right, so let's let this render for a minute and see what we think. I mean, the effect is very subtle. Um, much of much of the scene is very low contrast, and that's sort of the point. The idea is that it's not immediately apparent. You've got to look a little closer to see some of the detail that's going on here. Hmm. Yeah, removing the color really actually does help. I think I need to redo that underwater placement geometry. So let's see where our level is. Let's duplicate our friend here. We'll pull it out of that subdivision surface. We don't need that. We can make a larger selection now. We should. Or a smaller selection rather, leaving more of the space underwater because we have moved all that up. Cool. Now we slide this down just a touch. And I think that was actually fighting against us in terms of the depth. Now what we need to do is grab all three of these and grab, whoops, this one. Let's call this. Cool. Now let's see here. All right. Thanks, Azek. That is accurate. Another thing you could do is you could just animate. That would be kind of neat, actually. So if you took these two items, grouped them, just kind of animated the flood. In fact, I might do that. I've been inspired. Cool, so let's group these. Call them water. Let's also, a couple things. Let's modify these textures a little bit, especially now that we can see them more. So I'm going to add some roughness via a noise to our main texture here, just to break it up a little bit, our main gradient island texture here. Let's see what that does. Pretty good. Turn that down a bit, maybe make it a little larger. Cool, so it's going to break that up a little bit, which is good. Now, I'm not quite getting off the edge of the composition here in some spots with our cloner or our scatter. So what I'm going to do actually is just grab our underwater placement guy and make sure that he's totally outside. Let's actually go to outline selection, except we don't want any of that. All right. Now let's turn on soft selection, but just a bit. Just kind of expand that out. Cool. So that should cover us. Awesome. Well, let's set up some basic parameters. Ooh, one more thing, actually. I'm going to duplicate this, just modify the color a little bit. Just a little bit more variation. I'm going to throw that on below their partner. Let's see, this second one, the larger of the two. So darker yet. Cool, and I think our trees need to be a little darker too, a little bluer. Cool. All right, now let's define how many frames we want to do. Let's just do it over 30 frames. We can slow this down if we need to. What we're also going to do is set this up because we're going to have frames as an Octane render. All right, we'll go through some of those kind of details in a bit. Let's set this up. So we got our water group. I'm going to go coordinates, keyframe the Y position, and then at the end of the timeline, let's go ahead and bring that up. I wonder if I have to keyframe it again for Octane to care about it. There we go. I'm going to pause that. And I'm going to set this down to 720 just so we get a little bit of a quicker render. Whoops, let's lock that resolution. And we'll go for all frames. And let's go to Octane renderer. Actually, let's go to these settings. It's a little easier to do it this way. Actually, 540 is low enough. Yeah, I think that's good. Let's let her rip. We'll see what a rendering takes approximately. Yep. All right. It's about 44 seconds. A rendering is not so bad. This size, you know, it's not huge, but there is all this opacity and this volume and everything that we're dealing with. So certainly this is a composition that we could have really noodled with a lot and added a lot more, you know, plant variety and depth and stuff like that. Today's not necessarily super finished animation or illustration. This is, you know, as these episodes often are, an exploration into sort of a notion or a point of view about an image. I think there's some techniques we can hopefully find useful and you know, draw something productive from this episode. I'll certainly post the results of this animation over on my Instagram page at DLGNCE, possibly Twitter as well, same handle. So check me out over there if you want to keep up with the work that I'm doing and check out how this finished rendering looks. The website is diligence.studio. Appreciate it if you go check out my body of work there. Feel free to reach out via email or in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of this episode, if you'd like to see anything in the future. Really appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. If you want to support the show, and thank you to everyone who does. We have a handful of supporters, and I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Hit that out how you can buy your friend here a cup of coffee and you know, keep us productive. So until next week, this is Stuart saying thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you found it useful, and I'll see y'all next week. See ya.